What about Mount Hermeneutics? Breaking news. The Pope? He's Catholic. I know. We'll talk about it. So keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
Have you heard of the Chinese room illustration?
Nope.
Andrew, are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
Okay. It's an illustration.
Me either. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, don't ask Drake because why'd you not ask Drake? Because he's black.
I think so. I don't have experiences, especially Chinese ones.
Drake's not a person.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to exclude you, Drake. It's because Andrew's the computer science guy, and Matt's the guy who's arguing with me, and you were politely letting me finish my point. And so, but okay. So if you'll accept my apology for my implicit bias,
You're admitting that it was your bias.
I'm pleading no contest because I want to move on.
You're comparing what we do to professional wrestling.
Yes,
In a matter of speaking, sure.
All right.
in that it's
I mean,
entertainment.
I
This
didn't know
is
that was-
this is religious entertainment radio.
Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, if you want to take a peek at us. And you can find it by searching Mount Hermeneutics. And if you can't spell that, just use whatever you're looking at right now and how you're listening. Cut and paste that. But whatever platform you're on, hit the like button, the notify button, the stars button, the I like this trash button. I don't know what platform. I don't know what platform does I like this trash. Do you know? No.
The Marine Corps Gazette online maybe or something. I don't know.
That's good shit. That's a good shit button. That's the platform I want. So, okay, and I mean, if it's your first time with us, I'm Andre. That's Brian. That's Matt. Fellas, what's happening?
Hi.
You're in for a hell of a ride if this is your first time.
so,
I remember
yeah.
my first time.
Wow, we're a couple days later than we're normally, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had some trouble last week. That's on me. We took a swing at a React video, and it brought some challenges from an editorial perspective that I didn't see coming. So it took me a little bit of time to work through that. But we're back in the saddle.
Carrie was getting honored, and you had a bunch of guests at your house last Monday. So
There was that going on. Yeah. That's a fair point. I should probably give her toss a little shout out to Carrie. So my wife, the veteran advocate extraordinaire that she is, was honored by the Veterans Commission of Oklahoma, which is a organization that's operates in conjunction with and under appointment from the governor of Oklahoma. And so the net result was that as she was being honored as the Veteran of the Year for her veteran service work, it happened at the state capitol on the floor of the Oklahoma House of Representatives. So that was pretty cool. It happened in front of the legislature. It was a packed house. It was pretty cool. Brian was there. A couple of other of our friends popped in from out of town. Sean was there, MJ and Jackie, and Johnny even showed up, and of course local family and whatnot. But it was cool. It was neat to see that. I'd been there once before for another friend of ours that was honored. It's a pretty neat event. It's kind of cool to see the legislative body of a state give that kind of attention to veteran issues and veteran events. They also honored a couple of the legislators for being kind of like the most, veteran aware by that committee also. So that's kind of cool. And I don't know if anybody else noticed it, Brian, but especially sitting down on the floor and being able to see the legislators, they're genuinely surprised when they're awarded. They're not told ahead of time. And they seem genuinely emotionally affected that they've been awarded it. That's pretty neat. It's not like
Yeah,
glad they're
oh,
human.
me, right? Like they were like, kind of deal, and there's some tears and some, it
state
was,
legislators they're not like national legislators. They're like real people.
yeah, yeah. They actually like have like feelings and families and stuff.
I used to go there to the state capitol. I used to work there.
Yeah.
Kind of. I was a Capitol reporter for my first job out of college, so I spent all day, every day in the state capitol, sitting in committee meetings and interviewing senators and reps, and
That
and
sounds terrible.
it, it actually some of it was kind of cool.
Right.
But like any job, you kind of like you're glad to not be doing it, but it was actually probably the most consistent fun I've had as a journalist.
You're really
Um,
connected to something that mattered, and you knew what was going on, and you're kind of plugged in. And
I've always kind of been conservative leaning, especially after I became a Christian and when I was in the Marine Corps. But I really feel like I feel like one session covering like the state legislature was far more educational in so many different ways
yeah,
than 4 years of college was. Just because you're seeing the sausage get made, you're seeing them argue it out in real time, and you're seeing like how laws are getting made and how issues are being decided, and it's kind of it's a little scary learning like just how fallible the people who are running society are. I mean, this was 20 years ago, so that sounds silly saying it now when we see people like Jasmine Crockett or John Fetterman speaking publicly. But this was back when, um, before our national politics had degenerated to the point that it is. But anyway, I could
you,
do a whole show talking
so
about that.
it's
But
funny you say that because one of the representatives approached us afterwards behind in the green room area, and for those that don't know, Carrie and I run a not-for-profit service dog organization where we train veterans to train their own service dogs. And she comes up to us and she's like, "Hey, look, we've got a bill that we've passed, and it's waiting for the governor to sign. Would you guys reach out to the governor and ask him to sign it?" That's a weird thing to hear, right? Like she thinks that we'll have more pull than the average person because Carrie's the veteran of the year and we run a service dog organization and we think this is a good bill and you should sign it.
Because if he says no or gaffes you off,
Yeah.
that's
It's
not a
well,
good
it's
look.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
well, there's
But
no greater argument for a piece of legislation than my constituents want this.
right, of
And
course,
so
it's not just something we're making up. But
yeah.
to your point, Brian, I started quizzing her. We started talking about the issue at hand, and it's about essentially the state of Oklahoma is attempting to pass a bill to make it a crime to misrepresent a service animal.
I like
Right.
it.
Right. And
A
so,
little stolen valor.
exactly. So we got into, what does that mean? What kind of a crime? She's like, it doesn't really have teeth, but that's a start, this and that. But then I got into asking her, well, who who gets to say it is or isn't? And she's like, well, I'm like, certifications don't really exist. And I said, if we're going to create a state level certification, who's going to be on that committee? Congressman? Or are you going to come out into the wild to find dog trainers? And she was like, oh. So to your point, Brian, like,
Yeah.
I tried to politely make the illusion. It's frustrating when people that don't know anything about guns are passing gun laws. I said similarly, it's probably not a great idea to be making laws about service dogs without service dog people actually advising you on the bill, right? And I even, it's funny, Dre, you're going to think this is really funny because young Matt would not have done this, the old me. I said, what I would recommend is create a committee of service dog trainers. I said, because what you don't want to do is have just me as your advisor, because then the only thing any other dog trainer is going to do is like, well, what does that guy know? I say, but bringing in multiple trainers to get a more rounded point of view, would it? Yeah, we're not going to agree in the room, but we'll get to a common agreement that we could then live with going out into the wild. She was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'll have to reach out and I'll get back in touch with you guys." So it was interesting to just to restate that point, Brian, that they're not infallible by any stretch, and they're out there doing what they think is the right thing. Speaking of infallible, um,
Oh, yeah, that's a good segue.
while we were, everybody was at the house and we were having dinner, uh, MJ, Michael Johnson, brought up a point. He was like, I wonder when they're picking the Pope. He goes, you ever think about the fact that it's like political and it's not a kumbaya kind of experience? And of course, I brought up the Nicene Convention and, the fisticuffs that ensued and whatnot, allegedly. Um, But he goes to think about the fact that they're probably in a closed room screaming at each other, holding up, proof that so and so isn't the good guy that so and so said he was. And they're running these different Pope candidates into the dirt. He's like, and then the minute they've decided and they're all good, it's like, okay, put your robes back on. Then we're going to come out and we're going to act very pious and deferential and whatnot, when just 3 hours ago they were probably screaming and threatening to have people excommunicated and all kinds of wildness. It was an interesting thought, something I'd never thought of. But if you've seen Conclave or anything
Except
like
little does MJ know that the angel Gabriel actually just appears and says, like, this is the
You're
guy.
choosing Pope Bob. So
yeah. But yeah,
But I don't think the angel Gabriel.
Speaking of the room where it
did
happened, Aaron Burr sings that song in the musical Hamilton, which I saw on Tuesday, May 13th,
for your
because
birthday.
it was my 50th birthday.
Big birthday,
And-
man.
Yeah, so
It's a big event.
I mean, I didn't say the age. Delana's not watching anyway, but I think she's like, you don't have to tell people how old you are, like,
Because
You
she's
not
still
do that?
telling people she's 33 or something.
right.
Like
So
that. Yeah.
because I'm attached, so I'm like, you do realize that your children are grown ass people, right, with their own babies. Like, I was at Aubrey's house and I was like, she had toys everywhere, a little toddler running around. She's nursing a baby. They're watching like Winnie the Pooh on TV, and I'm like, holy shit! You're like grown. This is the life right here. This is
Yep.
it. And her husband's sitting there like, oh. calls his daughter. She runs over, Dad. So I mean, it was kind of fun just be in her house and watching all the shenanigans unfold, and remember me doing the same thing with her and her brother. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, I'm old now. I'm officially old. That's the
Yeah,
that's
40,
the line,
40
dude.
was like, to me, 40 felt like you're just officially a grown up. That was kind of how it felt. Like, you're in your 20s, you're like, am I really an adult? I don't know. You're in your 30s and you're like, okay, I'm no longer retarded. But
right.
like,
And it's time to get my shit together.
yeah, I got to start.
Right?
I got to start being serious. Then you turn
Yeah.
40 and you're like, straightening your tie. You're like, I'm an adult
You will
now.
respect my authority.
Yeah, what was Dre? You might not have seen it on the clips, but the Oklahoma State football coach did a meme where he was yelling at the reporters because they wanted to take a shot at one of his players. He's like, "You want to say something like that? Come at me. I'm a man. I'm 40."
Yeah.
So it just like it
It's like
got
one of the funniest
remixed.
clips.
And the editor that let it come out is garbage. Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Over and over and over again. I'm a
In fact,
man.
the local sports guys, their afternoon drive show is they're kind of comedians, and they have all kinds of like sound bites.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I'm a man. I'm 40. It's like
I'm a man. I'm 40.
somebody pushes the button on the board,
Yeah.
and that's pretty good.
It does seem strange that adulthood is so like delayed now compared to in olden times.
Yeah.
That might be worth
mean,
exploring.
Hamilton was 19.
Yeah. The founding fathers were all kids except for Jefferson. I mean, Franklin, right?
Franklin,
Yeah.
yeah. Like an old man.
And he
Yeah.
must have felt like Mick Mars with Motley Crue. He's like,
Easily.
oh, these freaking idiots.
Because even Washington was kind of older, right? He's
Well,
like,
he was a general, yeah, but he was
yeah,
probably a young general, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say
I think
he was in his 30s.
Yeah, I don't think he was that old when he became president.
I don't think he
he was in his
was.
40s when he was president. So
Was he?
I think he died like at 60 or something.
He was 57 years old when he became president.
Oh, no, he
Yeah,
was
so
old. He was old, old.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no wonder he
So-
quit after 2 terms. He's like,
He's like, I've lived a
Speaking-
life.
I got to get back to Virginia.
Yeah.
Free my slaves.
What
But
would you
only
say,
when I
Brian?
die.
Oh, I was going to segue into speaking of coming into higher office.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so the world is shocked and appalled, or at least the Western liberal media, that the Pope is Catholic. And
Yeah.
I think there's something there worth observing and commenting upon. So
Yeah, I think one of the big clips that I saw was it was a couple of the members of the View that are self-proclaimed Catholics. I'm curious how Catholic they are, but yeah, they were disappointed that they didn't pick somebody less Catholic. I think was the language that was the quote.
Yeah.
I read a little deeper to try to understand what it was she was saying, and it seemed like it was all about LGBT issues.
yeah, I have the quote in front of me from Sonny Hostin. Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
I'm a devout Catholic, Hostin said. Look, I always think it's exciting to watch the conclave and look for the white smoke and the black smoke and just the ceremony of it. And, you know, during these very trying times in our country, we certainly need spiritual leadership because some of the things that we're experiencing. What is she talking about? I don't know. I'm a little concerned about this choice for the LGBTQ plus community. And they, you know, went on about how Francis was supposedly pro LGBTQ2S plus whatever the letters are now. But
Was he though?
He
he was a little mealy mouthed about it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
But he never like outright.
Right.
I
He
think
he said that they should be blessed.
Right.
also
Um,
said there needs to be less faggotry.
Yeah, that too.
That's a direct
Francis said
quote
that?
from the Pope. Yes.
Yeah.
Francis?
Yes.
Attaboy.
I mean, I think there was something like he was speaking in I don't know if was it Italian or he came from
I don't think they had that word in Latin.
he was French, right? Was he French? I don't even know.
I
What
think
am
he's from I think he was from Argentina.
Oh,
I don't think
I think you're
that's
right.
not. No,
I don't know these things. I don't
Yeah.
know. We have an American though.
We do.
An American.
Tariffs are working.
Not only, yeah, he was from Argentina. But yeah, and the first Republican Pope even.
Yeah, votes
Is
Republican.
he's registered Republican?
Registered Republican. He's said a lot of anti-Trump stuff, but
That's
Who,
because
who
he's a climate
hasn't?
change. He's a climate change guy and a soft on immigration. So that's why.
yeah. And you know, our listeners are well aware that none of us actually really care who the Pope is. I think the whole idea of a Pope at all is just awfully silly. But this episode jumped out at me because it kind of it's a very widespread idea. Like I don't think the women of the View are. I don't think that they would have the audience and the longevity they've had if they didn't represent, you know, a large number of people. If they weren't somewhat representative of the average like daytime viewer. And so I don't think we're singling them out. Like I think this is applicable to our general ideas of religion and what it's for. And it betrays a level of just kind of vacuousness and crassness when it comes to religion that like deserves to be called out. But I don't want to start monologuing yet. So
No, I think you're right. I think it's indicative of modern, I hate to say Christianity, but I mean it is broadly speaking. I don't think it's something unique to the women of the View. I don't think it's unique to Catholics. I don't think it's unique to Protestants. I think Christians in general tend to be very they seem to think that society informs religion, not the other way around, or that it
Right.
should. And it does actually. So I should be careful how I say that. I'm reminded of, I know we've talked about it on here. I'm reminded of the interview between Candace Owen and Andrew Tate, when Candace asked Andrew Tate why he recently converted to Islam. And he said he looked around at the different religions and his instincts were to be a Christian, but he was appalled at how weak Christians were relative to their the lack of, I guess not weak, but their lack of seriousness about God. And the
Yeah.
fact that he was struck by the fact that Muslims are genuinely fearful of Allah, whereas Christians don't seem to be afraid of God.
Andrew
And
Tate is very good at observing pretty, observing reality and commenting accurately upon it, and then responding to it in the most just bonkers, absolutely
bombastic.
stupid way.
Yeah.
So
No, you're right. And that's his character, right? He's a caricature. It's how he gets his clicks. Um, but at the same time, like, it's hard to argue his point. Not that I'm going to go convert to Islam for reasons that we've covered innumerably on this show, but the seriousness through which Christians handle and
but
see their God.
he's kind of doing the same thing he's faulting Christians for.
How so?
Well, the reason Christianity is the way that it is that it's responding to market forces. It's a product of, that's the kind of Christianity that religious consumers demand. The problem with popular Christianity is that it's a consumer's market. So the churches that give people what they want and tell them what they want to hear, those are the ones that are going to enjoy the greater market share and set the standard for what normative Christianity is. Andrew Tate, so people go around and they shop around for a version of Jesus that suits them and reflects back to them the beliefs and values that they already had, quite apart from religion. And that's the same thing Andrew Tate did in choosing Islam. He found a religion that is as brutish and lowbrow and crass as he is. And because he's just like those Christians he's criticizing. He's the God he worships is just really himself writ large. And
Yeah,
that's kind of
my instinct is to turn this into an argument around the point you just made. I'm not going to, for two reasons. One, I don't think it's helpful to the show, and I refuse to be an Andrew Tate apologist out of the blue. But I feel like you straw manned the hell out of his decision making. I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to back it up, so you win the argument. I don't want to get into it, but I don't think that's true. It could be, but I don't think that's true.
well, I mean, it doesn't have to be an argument, but I mean,
Well, I mean, if you
what would be
if you just take what he
the
said,
Steelman version?
if you take what he said at face value and imply nothing, knowing nothing about him as a human being before that, and that he simply wants to worship a serious, awesome God. And he says, who worships a serious, awesome God? The Christians don't, because if they did, they wouldn't act and do the things they do. The Muslims, while they might seem cretinistic and barbaric, are being true to the teachings that they claim to follow. Like, I mean, that's, you cannot like the
yeah,
outcome and where that leads you, but you can take that at face value and go, I mean, the maths.
Well-
It's kind of both, because I mean, a guy like Tate that's what he's looking for. What he does. So I think you're both right.
But I'm more right.
Let me I guess.
I mean, I can see the point, right? Like if you
Right.
said, "Hey, what's the most serious, like intense, you know, religion, blah blah," and then you're like, "Well, this one they'll stone people and they still kill people, and they'll smack their women around." And he's like, "Oh, I love all that stuff. Say, tell me
Yeah.
more." Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I get that part. So you could get there that way, but you could also say which religion, takes their
Well,
religion more seriously and will kill people
and I
for attacking their religion, and you're like, yo, those are some gangster religious people.
yeah, but the number I mean the number one question you should be asking about any religion as your first and only criterion for joining it is it true?
Sure.
I mean the whole point of a religion, whatever the religion is that it purports to be the a represent eternal, immutable, transcendent, universal truths. Like it's unchanging. You come to a religion to conform to it because it's true and because it's what doesn't change, unlike culture and fashion and shifting social values.
That is what a logical, mature, honest, scholarly person would say and agree with, right? And yet we have millions and millions of Muslims and millions of Hare Krishnas and whatever other religion that doesn't hold up to that kind of scrutiny. So I agree with you, and yet here we are, which is a peculiar circumstance in of itself.
What do you mean by that?
I said, yeah, you're right.
No, I mean
All
like
the things you said, and yet we have all of these people that follow all of these religions that could never stand up to the analysis of, is this religion true?
Because they're not asking that question.
Right.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
They're looking for something else. They're looking for something that agrees with their ideals. What's interesting about Christianity, even in America, is that the numbers are going down, so they try to cater to people,
Hmm. Back
but
to
they're
Brian's
catering,
point. Yeah.
but they're catering to people that don't actually care.
Right.
So now you lose both, right?
You're losing genuine Christians and you're
right,
gaining milk toast Christians that
but
you
you're not
don't
even
really
gaining them
want.
because they don't stay because
Right.
they're not religious,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
they're
It's
they're looking for something to believe in the ideals, and we see that across the board in just America. I
well,
mean,
it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not just religion, right? It's
right,
politics.
right,
Most people pick their political world because of the people, their social circle, right? They're like, well, my friends
right.
are all liberals, so I got to be a liberal because if I become a conservative, I'm going to lose all my liberal friends.
Or
I'm
my
reminded
heroes
of the
are
I'm
I don't
reminded
right.
of the Seinfeld episode where he kept saying, "I don't want to be an orgy guy. Then I got to get orgy clothes and I got to get orgy friends."
I think I don't like I'm not even sure it rises to that level though. I think it's more like I don't think that they're consciously thinking. I mean, maybe it's there in the back of their mind. Like if I consider this, I'm going to
Oh, I
lose
don't think they
friends.
say. I don't think they go into it thinking that way. No, I agree with you.
But I think the basic motivation is that
I
they
disagree. I disagree
Really?
and the reason why I do is because they're the first person to shun you if you do, right? So if you believe that if someone's not listening or agreeing with your ideology and you are ready to cut them off, whether they are your blood relative or a kid you grew up with your entire life, you've been friends for 30 years, and then somebody, depending on who you voted for, you cut them out of your life completely. And if you have that mentality, then you believe that your friends have that mentality. So there's no way you're going to
see.
go off to another.
I'm not arguing that that's not in the mix. I'm not saying that's not on some level part of their motivation. I'm saying there's a more fundamental thing that's
Where they
happening.
believe they're truly right,
Well, I
which
think
the ends justify the means regardless.
they've been conditioned by their peer group. I mean, the basic orientation of everybody's moral compass, mine, yours, Jesus's moral compass, is the need for positive self-regard. Like you have to be able to think of yourself as a good person. And if you can't think of yourself as a good person, this bothers you. And so you either lie to yourself and bury the thing that singes your conscience, or you make it right. But I think the vast majority of people, that they have been conditioned to that positive self-regard based on peer approval, and it's all very, it's all passively absorbed. Most people don't really think through where, how they came by their particular set of moral values. For a lot of people, it's you grew up watching TV shows where certain messages were included in the writing, and maybe this one particular show doesn't move the needle, but cumulatively you watch 100 shows a year where the sympathetic victim happens to be a gay character, and their persecutor is some loudmouth, knuckle dragging, Bible thumping Southerner with a Southern drawl, so they sound especially dumb and obnoxious. You kind of internalize this idea that, oh, your protective instincts are aroused for this
That's
particular type, and then you build up kind of a prejudgment against people of this particular type. And so you get this attitude conditioned in the public that these people are to be protected, these people are bad, and so you get shows like The Handmaid's Tale that is it's obviously known to be scripted fiction, yet this is people treat it as if it's like a real life manifesto by their political enemies.
Adolescence is the new version of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like it's a documentary.
I think I think you're making a really valid point, Brian. Dre, I strange, example I'm going to use. John Tiffany. The dude was basically raised by I think his grandparents, and essentially like did nothing but watch Westerns and John Wayne movies his whole childhood. And that was really his personality as a guy. Like, he carried himself very seriously.
Wait till you see when he got older.
Yeah.
It was even more so.
Was it really? I mean, I can
Great-
only
great
imagine
dude.
because
Great
I
dude.
knew him as a young man, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, he
I was still like,
he got old quick. He had
yeah,
an
he
old
was
soul.
he was an old soul. And speaking of old souls, Sean Davis,
Yes.
very old soul, and also very black aware, right? He was raised, his nanny was an older black woman.
In Houston area,
from
right?
Houston, right? So
Yes.
like, pretty black. And he was raised by his grandparents. And so yeah, he's an old
With a name like
soul.
Terrell Davis. Come on.
He
He
him
can't even put
and-
that on a resume. He'll never get hired.
I don't know how he and Brian aren't like best friends. They both hate technology, they hate change. They hate kids walking on their front yard.
what makes you
Like-
think we're not what makes you think we're not best friends?
I just don't hear you talk about him a lot. Like, so
He
really,
he calls you a partner when he's arguing with you.
right. I'm gonna hang on there, partner.
Amigo.
So Dre, when we were going up to the Capitol, Sean meets us at my house and he rides with me. I bought a new car. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I bought a new car. It has pretty cool auto drive capability. It's not a Tesla. Not that I'm opposed to Teslas. It's just not a Tesla. Sean was horrified by it. I was showing it off to him while we were driving down the highway, and he's like, I'm like, this is probably making you really uncomfortable. He's like, oh, wow. And I go, let me guess, you're going to ride back with Brian. He rode back with Brian.
I thought he just wanted to hang out with me. I didn't know he was just.
He's afraid of my Knight Rider car.
What's funny is like we went to Costco to get the sides.
Yeah.
And like I didn't know where it was, so he's just giving me directions.
Mhm.
He sucks at giving directions.
Is that right?
Like
that doesn't shock me at all.
but he's like, okay, turn left up here, and I'm like, and I point like at the light. He's like, and I go up here, and he goes, and he's like, next left, and I'm like, okay, fine, and he gets very micromanagerial, like, okay, get in this lane now, and like I don't want to argue with him, and I don't want to like, okay, fine, but then afterwards, like I don't know more that very well. The town where you live in very well. So I just Google mapped it. He's like, you don't need that. I know how to get there. And I'm like, no, I think let me use the robot, and you and I don't communicate that well. But and so I've got the robot on, and and he repeats like unironically what Google Maps just told me to do, but he's still doing like, okay, get in this lane, and I'm like, Sean, I'm gonna murder you. Stop. And
To my earlier point, Brian, you just described like a later version of grumpier old men, like two old men driving around. Ah, this technology. Where are we going? I don't know.
it was pretty. I mean, it's funny in hindsight. At the
Sure.
time, I was about to stab him, but
You know, I want to go back to something you said when you were talking about being conditioned and
Mhm.
learning to be protective, and having, you start skewing toward this is good and this is bad. I guess my question to you is, isn't that the exact same argument that left-leaning people use to explain systemic racism?
I'm not sure.
Because we're conditioned that white people and white culture is the standard, right? So anytime that something's introduced in a person of color, a BIPOC, if you will, then then uh then we lean toward the white, which means that we're always using whiteness as that guide, as that premise for what is good, and everything else is not as good. Therefore, every decision we make, even subconsciously, is in favor of white men, because that's where our moral compass is. It's basically what everything you just said, only if we
Yeah.
say it's white and not, well, black or Hispanic or gay
Well,
or
as a white person,
Mhm.
like I don't think in that those categories. I mean, I don't think most white people think in terms of whiteness or blackness. We just this is the world as we find it.
But that's the point, right? So you said that by watching 10 TV shows where a sympathetic character is a certain way, therefore you're automatically protective of that. But if you grow up in a society that
Well,
protects white people, whether you think in those terms or not, you are protecting white people, are you not?
well, in the specific instance that I'm talking about, like it's the gay character is there for no other reason than to be victimized by the villain in order to arouse the viewer's protective instincts.
And to be clear, I
Um,
don't believe in systemic racism. But if I was an adversary of you and I heard all those things that you were saying, I was like, that's
yeah.
exactly what I'm telling you. That's
Well,
exactly what I'm telling.
the difference is that what I'm describing is it's deliberately engineered to elicit certain reactions
Same with
that
white people.
Mm,
yeah, I don't think
That's the argument.
well,
well,
but
yeah,
Whether
but
we say that it is or not, that's the argument. And I think that a liberal would say that no, it's not engineered. They're just being represented.
yeah, I would answer it this way. Um, I just saw a statistic, and I have to find it. But basically, they did a study with regards to jurors, right, jury members,
Mhm.
and the ethnicity of the juror was wildly represented by their vote. So I'm going to try to remember the statistic and not butcher it. If a white person is the juror and it was a black defendant, they found them not guilty. I want to say it was like 31% of the time. And if it was white, it was like 39%. So there was a small differential between the black defendant and the white defendant. But if it was a black juror, they found them guilty like 24% of the time and voted not guilty like 77% of the time. It was like this massive swing between guilty and not guilty. Um, and
like the OJ trial would be a good
yeah, yeah.
example.
What the data, the way I interpret that information is, Dre, to answer your question, when a minority is seeing a minority situation, they're defending the minority. When a white person in America is defending a person, they're defending a person. That is just more often than not white because there's more white people than there are non-white people. But
Yeah.
that doesn't, I don't think that plays into the white point of view. They go, oh, we got to defend that good, upstanding white man over there. Like they just go, well, that guy didn't do what you're saying he did. Um, and then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, he happens to be black, happens to be white, happens to be, you know,
And to
I
the
mean,
question of
Croatian or
representation,
whatever.
and to the question of representation in media, it just so happens that we live in a white majority
right.
country. And so naturally there's going to be a white majority of representation. They've done other studies where they ask people to based on the TV shows that they consume and the commercials and all the media they consume to kind of guess the racial the demographic makeup of America. Like what percentage of it is black. A lot of people guess like just wildly above the truth, like 50% or 40% or something. Like they think that there are way more black people than there are. Black people are only like 13% of the population. Um, Most people don't know that. Most people think it's much larger. So
Right.
the fact that you don't have like at least half of the the board of directors of major corporations being black, well, that's a sure sign of racism. Well, that's just crazy. There aren't enough black people to go around to be represented in all of these places that they're
Yeah.
demanding. And by insisting that they are, but
Yeah. And then if you use, homosexuality, it's like 10, 12%. So if you wanted a black homosexual, now you've got 10, 12% of 13%, assuming that the standard deviation breaks evenly, right? Like, so now you've got a tenth of a tenth, which for those, doing math at home is like 1.1. You don't have a big pool from which to draw those representations. It's,
yeah.
No,
Eh,
I don't know. I think
and
so I had a
yeah.
personal, like, and I like to do this with myself. My son's doing like this big Marvel thing where he's watching all the Marvel movies and shows in order. And I walk out in the kitchen, in the living room, and he's watching Defenders. And I was like, oh, I've never watched this. And then I'm like, why have I not watched this? Right?
It's
Because
all
it
right.
has, it's got a pretty good cast in it. And specifically, as I was watching, I was like, oh, I didn't know Daredevil was in Defenders. I was like, oh, now I'm really intrigued because I really liked Daredevil. And I never watched Iron Fist. I never watched Jessica Jones, and I never watched Luke Cage. And I caught myself going, why haven't I watched these? And I'm like, why didn't I watch Luke Cage? I really like that actor. Like I was like, the
Right.
dude who plays
And
Luke
the
Cage.
and
I'm
the
a
bad guy is great too. It's
Oh, I don't know who it
yeah.
is, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of the actor from Luke Cage. I don't know his name. Um, but it was funny because I was like, did I not watch him because Jessica Jones is a chick and Luke Cage is black? And I'm like, no, because I love that guy. Like
Right.
I like him in all the other things I've ever seen him in. He was in Evil. Um,
Yes, yes.
and he's super good in that. But it was just interesting. I had to like ask myself why, and I just, you only have so many hours to watch so many
That's
shows.
actually
Is
why.
really what it comes down to. And I didn't prioritize it because I didn't go, oh, it's a black superhero. I need to watch it.
And they're not as good as Daredevil. Yet good.
yeah, I really enjoyed Luke Cage.
Yeah.
I think I like Jessica Jones more than Luke Cage. Iron Fist was meh, but it was like
Right.
in hindsight with what the MCU is doing now, like
Awesome.
it's probably a lot better than I probably enjoy a lot more going back and watching it in hindsight. But
In both seasons, the Punisher was good.
Super good.
I hated the second season.
Oh, wow.
That's another example of what I'm talking about. The villains in Punisher season 2 are these conservative they're not they don't identify them as Republicans, but they're obviously Republicans. They're conservative politicians who are part of this kind of Christian Republican coalition, and they have a gay son who they're ashamed of. And so they were trying to have someone killed who knew he was gay, and it was the whole thing was just a oh, and they used this assassin who was a devout Christian, and he's like he's very devout and prayerful before he murders somebody for them.
I don't feel like I watched the same show you watched.
The Punisher season 2.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
remember any of the Christian conservative overtones. Like I remember the guy was like he had built out this company and he was basically, like Blackwater. But
that's season 1. Season 2, the
have I
villain
not
is
seen season 2?
I uh it's Annette O'Toole who played Martha Kent in Smallville. She's one of the villains.
Maybe
in
I
it.
haven't watched it.
She's
But,
Lana Lang in Superman 3.
All right,
Yeah.
well stop talking about it. Maybe I need to go back
Yeah.
and watch it again.
Maybe.
Maybe
Um,
I was drinking too much when I watched it.
But I mean, whoever wrote that obviously hates Christians and wants you to hate Christians too, and wants to convey. And the gay guy, he was like the one innocent person in the entire thing.
Okay, well stop spoiling it.
But it's it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, and relating that back to the whole like all of the leftist media being scandalized that the Pope is in fact Catholic. And particularly, I thought Sonny Hostin's remarks, they're so emblematic of this broader issue that I want to talk about, and I've kind of talked about, but like I kind of think it sums up everything that I loathe about Catholicism, but it also kind of applies to mainstream popular Christianity too. Like she's just to reiterate, she likes the white and the black smoke and the ceremony of it.
The pomp
She's
and the circumstance and all
right,
of that. Yeah.
but
Was it-
she's very concerned about where he's going to take the church with regard to LGBTQ stuff. So she hates the underlying character of Christianity, this expectation that is basic to Christianity, that you can't just follow your glands and your appetites and reject the divine order and still be acceptable to God.
Was that
But she,
gland with a D or without a D?
with it, glands like
Okay.
your sex glands.
I didn't know if you meant
Um,
the glands as in the never mind.
You know,
um,
one of the first people
your
that I ever
animal
met
instincts, what I mean.
Sure.
that I realized was Catholic. And, you talk to her, she said, "Yeah, I just love being Catholic.
Love being Catholic.
Like I'm Catholic because I am."
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so you gonna pitch me on it? Nope. I just am.
Worst
Right?
Catholic ever. Like
Yeah, and there's in Utah, I've noticed there's quite a few Mormons that are that way as well. Like I was raised Mormon. This is my culture. This is who I am, and it doesn't matter if all that other stuff. And I enjoy my world where I live, and
Yeah,
it's always been very very interesting to me that those are two lifestyle choices. And come to think of it, there's plenty of Christians. Like I'm Christian because it's the right thing to do.
Sure. No,
I'm
absolutely.
Christian because I was raised in this area and everyone was Christian, and the church is where I
It's
met my wife, and the church is where
it's
I
not
go for the Easter dinner, right? Like it's social.
it's not I have chosen this because it's true and right and proven, and therefore I'm conforming to it. It's this is right and true and good because it's mine. Because
Right.
it's my tribe and culture, and this is where I find my
Yeah.
identity and my security. And so in that regard, it's really no different than if you're raised Muslim, you're probably going to be a Muslim. And you're going to be conditioned
Assuming you
into it.
grow up.
Yeah, you don't that's
Uh,
that's
you
a
know, all of
valid,
that's really
it's a very
really
dark
hard
yet valid point.
hard for me to relate to. And same with the whole I form my opinions and my morals based on the content of stuff that I watch, right? Like, and maybe it's because I haven't chosen a religion because I don't believe any of them are true. So because the people are like, hey, how come you're not baptized? Like, because I don't think that's true. And I can't, you know, it's one thing to lie to myself, it's another thing to lie to God. And I'm not doing that. Right. So I think because that's been my mentality my entire life, I've never been really drawn. I won't say I haven't been influenced by pop culture and stuff and my friends and my circle, but I've always been open to change when it comes to that. You know, if somebody presents
You're
me with
like the
evidence,
Jordan Peterson of
I'm
our
swaying
show.
toward that evidence. Maybe, maybe. Like I grew up watching the same cartoons you guys did. I'm the same age, right? We watched the same
Well, you're a
sitcoms
little bit older.
and whatnot. And fuck you. Don't believe that. That's the
You are older
but
than us.
that's it's true. It's a fact. We're speaking facts. But just
This
the
is
facts,
one
man.
time when I can say it's objectively true.
Like you're
It's
like
objective,
super way older than us.
super way. Um, so yeah, I've always, and I think it has to do with the culture I grew up in too. I was in an alternate religion. I was biracial. Like all these things that kind of contradict in society at large. I've always been on the edge. It's strange that a lot of my like friends have been people that people hate, right? Like uh Darcy Trimmer's my friend.
Interesting.
Nobody likes that guy, right?
I like Darcy.
Rob Vickers, you know,
I grew into. I mean,
yeah. So,
Vickers
but I'm
and
just
I are
saying,
fine now, but
like
yeah,
there's just been I've lost opportunities before because people are like, why are
We
you
just
friends
lost two potential listeners. They're gonna be like,
with
"Go check this show."
with
Hey,
what the hell?
the hell did I know?
Hey.
Darcy Trimmer catching strays.
Especially Darcy because he's like big board again. So if we can catch
Is
Darcy
he?
again, he might be able to contribute to the show. Yeah,
I-
like 10 years ago, he hit me up on Facebook and say he's not that way anymore. Like
Hmm.
the things we the shenanigans we got ourselves into.
Hopefully, there's like a Leslie Burchett that just peed on himself laughing when he heard you say that about Trimmer and
right,
Vickers.
I don't think he. I'm not sure he listens to our. I've
he
asked him
needs
if
to.
he. I've
But
asked him about it, and
it's
he.
uh
But he.
I've
But
I have friends today.
But your
I won't say their
point,
names because I'm friends with them right now, and
I,
so,
I,
and people are
I
like, I don't like that guy. How are you friends with him?
yeah,
Because he's always been cool to me. And
right.
I've always had that one guy that's been, or that one relative that's super cool to you every time they see you and gives you money and hangs out and like that aunt that everyone hates, but she's so cool to you.
Hmm.
Like you like her. I'm like, dude, she's never said an ill will word to me. Like, how am I
Just
supposed
because
to
y'all
treat her?
hate her, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I find myself in that position throughout like every phase of my life. Just looking back, I can pick that guy, I can pick that instance, I can pick that religion, I can pick that political stance. So
Hmm.
I don't know if it means
Interesting.
anything. Yeah. But I'm just not influenced like that. Like
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think your point broadly is you're saying that you've never gone along with what everybody else is doing because you've been trying to figure it out on your
you
own and
you
make your own read of every situation, every relationship, every
you've been an outsider by circumstances, and so you've been, which I can relate to. I think I'm probably. I think I'm largely immune to peer pressure. Like I was always the new kid, so I just never really like had much shot of being popular, so it wasn't even really a temptation to begin with. And
those
so
social science experiments like fascinate me. And when I see
like the Stanford
mobs
experiment, like the big
when
ones.
mobs like kind of groove and roll into, I'm like, wow. It's like I'm not even mad. I'm like, wow. I'm so confused. The Stanford experiment or blue eyes, green eyes, right? Blue eye, brown eye. Holy balls. These
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Like,
Humans are, I mean, we've said it before on the show. You know, we're so closely removed from the animal kingdom. And yet the average person thinks they're so far above and beyond animals. And we're like just the smallest little step. I mean, I felt like that was the entire point of the Walking Dead show.
or the
Was
purge.
Yeah, The Walking Dead was to me it was a treatise on humanity, with a zombie apocalypse as a backdrop.
Sure.
right? Because it was always the humans causing the problems. It was rarely the actual zombies.
Well, the zombies basically were a force of nature. And
Right. Yeah.
It's like Lord of the Rings Lord of the Flies for adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what
And then especially when you
happens
consider
when-
that the humans made the zombie problem, right? So it's not like they didn't just evolve.
Did they?
Yeah.
In The Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Did they establish that it was caused by humans?
Okay, maybe I'm having a Mandela.
That's an I Am
moment.
Legend
Yeah,
storyline.
maybe
for
I'm
sure.
having a Mandela effect moment, but I thought it was. But
It was just a disease that broke out and nobody really. I mean, I don't know. I haven't watched.
I think it came from China.
Yeah, but diseases breaking out is our fault too. So
That was kind of my point. Is like,
Yeah.
you know, whether they did it intentionally or not is, you know, I don't think
or just
anybody's
leaked from a lab somewhere.
I don't
near
think
a wet
anybody's
market.
accused the good folks of Wuhan from doing that on purpose yet.
Here we are.
I think
What could
I
go
think they
wrong
were-
is always my question.
I
What
think
could
they
go
were. I
wrong?
think they were making a weapon on purpose that
Yes.
got out of their control.
Well, whether they were making the weapon or they were making the weapon so that they could create the cure for it, like it's still, you know, 6 in one and half a dozen in the other, but it's still
Outcomes, baby.
it's
Outcomes.
kind of hard to argue the, you know, the chain of events. So I
Yeah.
mean, you know, so we kind of went around the world, but I think it's an interesting conversation point to say, you know, where does belief, you know, not belief in the sense of, you know, spiritual belief, but more like, you know, why does a person put their eggs in a basket, so to speak, right? There's a lot of functions behind it. It'd be really interesting to be able to have a subset of people that had wildly different beliefs from what they were raised to believe, and then kind of try to figure out what they had in common. Like what caused them to rebel so heavily against how they were raised. Because I don't think that's the norm, right? You get people like Dre, who was raised away and he only deviated a little bit, right? Like you were raised Jehovah's Witness, you're just a little bit off center. Like some would say it's a huge bit off center, but it's not like you said, I'm going to be a, you know, I'm not going to go to Judaism, or I'm going to be a Hindu,
Hindu.
or yeah, you know, like that would be to me wildly, you know, a big left turn. But you know, people are raised around, you know, conservatism, and they become liberal.
Mormonism
and vice versa.
is pretty far off from Jehovah's Witnesses.
I mean, is it?
That's
I don't think it is at all.
I don't think it's
kind of
very
the
far
opposite.
at
apart.
all.
No, I don't think they're
I
very
think
far
it's.
apart.
I think it's the same damn thing.
It's like the Jehovah's Witnesses reject the Trinity in one direction, and then Mormons reject the Trinity in the completely opposite direction.
I think they're
I
different
don't,
sides.
I don't
of
know
the
how
same
that's.
coin.
I don't know how that's in a different direction.
It's totally opposite theologies. I mean, maybe culturally there are similarities.
I don't
But
understand how
theologically-
theologically they're that much different.
Theologically, Jehovah's Witnesses believe there is one God, and they are theologically Unitarian, and so they reject the divinity of Jesus, and they
Right.
reject the divinity of the Holy
Well,
Spirit.
the divinity, they don't. They believe Christ proceeded from the Father. Right.
They
Separate
believe-
beings. Right?
They believe that Christ is a created being who is
Proceeds from the
only-
Father. Yeah.
only a man.
Right.
They don't believe that it's like they don't believe he is in any sense divine. He is.
That's not true.
That's not true
That's
at
not true.
all.
Well,
They
so
believe
he's
he
divine.
was no. They believe he was divine. That's why I'm saying their belief in Jesus is the same as the Mormons. The only difference is the Mormons have that whole pre
They,
God.
they believe that Jesus is an angel, so he is divine. Like
Well, he's not
he
divine
came to
in the
earth in
sense-
flesh,
He's not divine in the sense that he's God. He's divine in the sense
right?
that
Because
he
there's
is
only
a-
one God, but he is a God.
Okay, but
He's
he's
Elohim.
Linda, tell us what we got wrong.
um
And
Mormonism, on
LDS
the other hand-
also thinks there's only one creator,
well, but he was once a
not the
do they,
creator.
though? Well,
Yes.
but they believe that he was once a man.
No, they
as
believe
God
our
was.
creator was once a man, not the creator.
There's
of the
one above
universe.
him. They're
Yeah.
up a level.
So if
And there's
If-
plenty of Mormons that can correct
if-
this or
if-
comment.
Well, and I don't think Mormonism is consistent enough that you can nail down one thing, but there are things that have been said that we've discussed that said that establish that the God in view in the Bible was once a man who
Yes.
ascended to become God, and that humans can also ascend. So he's not different in kind, he's different in degree. We're actually the same kind. And if and so basically, we can all become creator gods and then have our create people and then they can become creator gods. So it's basically this infinite polytheism. Um, so it's
I mean,
so in that
that's a way to couch it. Yeah. But they believe that there's just one level above that. That's the starting point. That's
um but that I mean I'm not aware of that. I'm if it seems that if God the Father, as they call him, was once a human being. He is a created being who was presumably created by a previous God who was also once a
no,
man,
that's the
and
point,
so on
that
and
they
so
don't believe
forth.
that first one. So it's not, without turning this back into that. Basically, you can go up and out, but you can't. It's not an MLS. You can't make a multi-level corporation, right? To where you can't make gods below gods, and then
Hey,
gods going up.
let us
But
know. Tell us where we got this right
But
or wrong.
it's still essentially polytheistic.
Sure, we got
sure,
you.
Which
We heard
which,
you.
but anyway, like
yes.
We heard you.
that's not the show. Um,
I mean, the Pope is going to be a creator one day. I think it's,
yeah, and so, but
and
anyway,
he's from Chicago, and no wonder the Astros lost in 2005. I mean, if you got the Pope, the future Pope praying, did the White Sox win? White Sox are winning, but
Can he pray for that though?
I don't know.
That feels
you can
that
pray
feels
for anything he
dirty.
wants.
It could be dirty. I mean, I saw Angels in the outfield, so I think maybe he moved the ball, right? Because
Mm.
he's the future vicar of Christ, for crying out loud.
Future, he is.
He is. Well, it was in
He's already
2005.
the Pope, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, he's means in the past tense when he did
Oh,
whatever
In
you guys are
2005.
talking about. He was,
I
but
got you.
And can I call him Pope Bob? Because his name's Robert. I think that's cool.
That's dead
um,
naming.
Damn it. I don't want a dead name. I'm sorry. Apologies, and I will acknowledge the land that I'm on that's stolen.
you could probably you could. What are we talking about? Um,
Um, that's
yeah.
what we were talking about.
So Sunny Hostin, she hates the underlying character of Christianity. She
I think that's true.
rejects she rejects the basic requirements that you not just blindly follow your glands and appetites, and that you submit to and carry it and advance the divine order. But she digs the ceremony and the ritual and the costumes and the Latin chants and the theatrics. It, so it's
Does she
basically,
know she believes that?
I don't think so.
yeah, I don't think she knows she believes that, but if you've got this idea that if your sexual orientation is an identity that the church is supposed to affirm because it's your sexual identity. I mean, this
But that's not why they think that it's their identity, because it's their identity, and that God doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
Therefore, if you see yourself in this light, that means that that is your true and authentic self. And if you believe that that is somebody's true and authentic self, then are they really succumbing to appetite? So whether or not that it's reality and we see it that way, do they see themselves that way? And I
well,
think that's kind of
but my point is, like, however sincerely they hold the beliefs, what the beliefs that they're holding and that they're insisting that the Pope affirm is essentially a rejection of Christianity. I mean, the Christianity is that we are all born. I mean, one, I don't think there's any evidence that anybody is born gay, but let's just concede that for the sake of argument. We're all born with a sinful nature. That we all have to die to. And the whole point of Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension is so that he could expiate our sins and then send the Holy Spirit to dwell within us to give us a new nature. in asking for that and seeking that from Jesus Christ, we're acknowledging that our own nature is fallen and corrupt, and we need a new nature. If we're coming to Christianity or Catholicism and Christianity in any iteration, and we're saying God made me this way, therefore you have to affirm me in it, or you're not following the love of Christ. Well, you've missed the point. You don't actually want what Jesus offers, because you don't think you need salvation, because you think this is my nature is a justification. If this is my nature is a justification, then we don't need salvation at all.
I'm not sure that I agree with all of that, but I think the point that Dre was making and asking his question was, is it genuine, is it malevolence to think that if you don't understand how wrong it is? Right? Like I think the point is the self-awareness and the maturity around the view of the theology has something to do with it, because while there's a lot of people that fit the category that you're describing, I would suggest or argue that not all of them know that. Now there are some that do.
I would agree that most of them don't know that.
There's certainly some that do, and I think we see that when we see these, you know, uh, uh, priests. I'm using air quotes for the listeners not watching. There's priests out there that are priests or pastors for various churches that will garb themselves in rainbow adorned colors and all this kind of stuff, right? They know what they're doing, because they're presenting themselves as an expert. They're presenting themselves as a
especially if they went to seminary,
right?
And by the way, you haven't said anything that I disagree with.
No, I know. No, I'm just kind of tying this together.
Yeah.
So I think back to Dre's question. The real question is, how do we help them?
Right, and that's where I was going.
Right.
Right there, man. Like, okay, so we see this problem, and we see, how, as Christians, how do you reach out and how do you actually touch that person?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you stay persistent enough to penetrate those ideals that are obviously entrenched in them, right? And then once they get affirmed by whatever society or their circle, then it becomes that much thicker of armor.
Yeah.
How do you penetrate that?
And I think I agree with Matt that there's plenty of blame to lay at the feet of phony Christian preachers,
false prophets, if you will.
Right. I think there's also plenty of blame to lay at the sincere, well-meaning conservative preachers who have just done a very poor job of conveying what Christianity is. But also, I don't think that gets Sunny Hostin and the people like her off the hook. A lot of their vacuity and just ignorance about she says she's a devout Catholic, yet she's totally oblivious to the fact that she doesn't know basic Christian teaching. A lot of this is because of her own arrogance toward it. Like it's like learning more about it just isn't of value to her. Like
but that could also be because nobody sat her down to show her how little she actually knows, right? She's suffering from what's the Dunning-Kruger, right?
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger of religion, right? Jake, my friend, made a comment the other day that actually caused me to lose my balance. It was so forceful what he said. So we were having a back and forth about U.S. spend on Israel relative to what they do in the world, and we were comparing it and contrasting it to what we spend on Egypt and I forget the other country, but other Middle Eastern countries that are, Islamic, and what we get back from the Israel spend versus what we don't from the others, and blah blah blah. All of that doesn't matter, but what he said at the end, he goes, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that pound for pound, the U.S. is more evil and depraved than all of the Islamic countries put together. And I was like, what? And he was like, solely premised on the number of infants that we kill.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, I need a minute to think about that because that really like was a kick in the balls.
I think on Judgment Day, we're like we're gonna have to answer for what can
That's
only be described as a Holocaust.
and that's when I started thinking about it. And I made the comment earlier, and we kind of went full circle around, uh, and the Andrew Tate interview. That became kind of like circular in my head because Andrew's not wrong. Like we as people that are supposedly Christian are allowing this to happen.
We're
And
championing it to have. We're celebrating it.
or just turning a blind eye to it.
Well,
Which
I mean,
and like when I say we, like the religious right, the conservatives
Sure.
certainly aren't championing it and celebrating it, but we're certainly choosing not to fight about it, right?
Um, I I mean
there's a few.
I don't know what more to do that
Well,
like
I mean, so to use
I-
Andrew Tate's logic, right? Every Christian adult male should be physically stopping abortions from occurring. If we were biblical people in biblical times, that would be an expected outcome of the men of the community.
I don't think I don't think I agree with that. I don't know that you can I don't know that physically stopping abortions from happening would have much of an effect.
It would if it
Um,
happened every time.
I think there's very little that you can do to advance God's kingdom by coercive force. I don't
It's
think
not
Or
that,
about,
even
I don't, this isn't about God's kingdom. This is about saving babies from being murdered.
I think a better tactic that would get more practical results, at least what practical results are possible, would be to do everything in our power to persuade those women
I
not to do
agree.
it. And there's a deeper component to that of persuading as many people as possible that Christianity is actually true and warrants their faith. And
Shout out
therefore,
Cameron.
and its values, which preclude murdering babies. And that, but the problem is, a huge chunk of the abortions that are happening are by self-professed devout Christians and devout Catholics, precisely because there are so many Sonny Hostins out there
Yeah.
who love the costume and the ceremony
Yeah.
and the man-made, manufactured holiness of it all, but they hate the character of it because that's not really the source of their values.
could you be friends with Sonia Hostin?
Could I be friends with her? I personally can be friends with anyone, but I think you guys know me well enough to know that I don't I say what I think when I think it, and I don't really pull my punches, and I don't
So the
I don't
question was, could Sonny be friends with Brian?
right. And to the abortion issue, like I have like family members who I love dearly. They're my favorite humans on earth who have had abortions, and I with great sorrow in my heart and with a broken heart, really, I tell them, I love you dearly, but you committed murder.
I really do.
You can be forgiven for that, but you can't, but not if you just deny it, not if you keep promoting it. And they don't like hearing that. But if I but I would rather alienate everyone I love and have a clear conscience because I've spoken the truth against it than enjoy their affections on the basis of a lie. And I think that's all I know that I can do to try to stop abortion from happening.
So is there a line where you have said your piece? They've acknowledged that you've said that. They acknowledge that you believe that. Do you have to tell them again and again
When it comes up,
and again?
but
I
sadly,
mean, I think
I don't chase them down and like,
right. I mean, I just there's the old story of, I guess, kind of recent, within decades, of of the black guy that just hangs out at KKK rallies, right? So it's not a and just becomes friends with them, genuinely shows his inside, and one by one they stop being racist because they're exposed to something else. And I've had a couple of work environments where I didn't even disclose what political leaning that I have. I just inject into conversations, and it's usually subtle, or it's a topic that's safe. And then there's questions that follow, and you just start with little inception, right? And I think it's probably more important to be friends with those people and be that example and show that divine love. Because if you don't, then our world is going to stay fallen.
Yeah.
I think that's obviously I wasn't calling for massive violence
Right.
at that was a thought experiment. I do think a fatwa was in place, not a jihad. Um, but no, I think you're certainly right, and I know Brian, you had said the same, right? That was your point of we have to change the hearts. I mean, that's essentially what Christ was preaching at the Sermon on the Mount, right? So it strikes me that we've got to get in a position so that we can have these conversations and it not be about, because I think the problem is the conversation can't be about the issue. I
Well,
don't think you're going to convert. Now, let me finish this point. I don't think you're going to convert a liberal to Christianity by attacking abortion. I think you're going to convert a liberal to Christianity by presenting Christ and presenting the Bible and the fact that Christianity is true. And then
well,
once you get them there, then you go, hey, we need to circle back to this other point now.
I'm not sure those are distinguishable though.
I don't understand what you
Well,
mean by
and
that.
well, I think like when when the issue of abortion comes up, no, I'm not going to go out of my way to like pick a fight with somebody over abortion, but when the issue does come up, let me back up a little bit and come at this from a different angle and to kind of bring it back to the main topic about the Sonny Hossens of the world who claim to be devout Catholics,
Mhm.
but hate the character of Christianity because it's a costume they wear. I think this is such a widespread problem because churches in general don't, well, one, they don't teach apologetics. They don't teach people why Christianity is true, but that itself is just a component of an overall of an overall like lifestyle and process of integrating the gospel into their lives and outlooks. Like a lot of people who are they're socially conservative. They go to what we would regard to be generally Orthodox churches, although I have to put an asterisk by that for reasons we all know, and I don't want to revisit it now, but all the longtime listeners know where I stand on the mainstream church and where it's wrong. So I don't want to revisit that. But my point is like the best churches, the best people in them, that typically people don't really integrate their Christianity into their lives. Like they don't have a firm grasp of how the gospel relates to science, how it relates to government, how it relates to how laws should work and how society should run. They don't like it's just not. Several years ago when I was that at the church that I used to go to when I was a member, and I think I brought this up before. The pastor mentioned at the end of the sermon that a woman of the church had approached him before the service and asked her if he could like teach her how to share her faith. And so he's like, yeah, sure. Well, I'll put on a class this afternoon. And he put the invitation out to anybody who wanted to join. He's going to teach us how to share our faith that afternoon. And so I was very curious how he was going to teach that in an hour or two class in one afternoon. So I went to it, and it was pretty much like, here's this tract to teach people the four spiritual laws, and just kind of, and people would ask him questions like, well, what if they ask this question or da, 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 da. Well, they're just trying to distract you. Just keep to the program. And it just, this is going to sound a little, probably a little douchey and arrogant on my part, but I hope you guys know me well enough to know that it's not. I don't, I've never had to get a course in how to share my faith. Um, I always wind up talking about God and Jesus Christ. If I'm getting my hair cut and somebody asks me, and she's making small talk with me, 10 minutes later, I'm talking about Jesus Christ because every issue relates back to God and Jesus Christ. Everything relates back to first principles. Why is this valuable and that's not? Why is this right and that wrong? This social issue, that social issue, everything kind of it all relates back to God. Um, and if you've integrated the gospel into your worldview, you don't have to be taught how to share your faith. You just do that automatically because everything connects back to it. And so, relating it to the issue about do you talk to the liberal about abortion or do you share with them Jesus Christ? Well, talking to them about abortion or any given social issue, if you have integrated your faith into your worldview, that's going to relate back to Jesus Christ. The very question of, well, why is life even sacred? Why is anything right or wrong? Why is it wrong to murder babies? Well, because there's an absolute, because human life, because life is made in the image of God. Um, and you are
Yeah,
violent.
but so I agree with everything you're saying from the point of view of we shouldn't live a disconnected life, right? Like our church life should be the same life as our work life and our friend life, right? Like you shouldn't have separate sets of friends. You shouldn't have your three buddies that you could do church things with, but then when you go out on Friday night, it's the other guys you call up, right? Like they should be the same crew. It should be the same people, and you should have a relatively similar face. I'm not saying we don't code switch, but my point is you can't you can't convince a non-believer that abortion is wrong because we're all made in the image of God if she doesn't believe in God.
Well,
Like that's the most inane way to get to a point because you've got too many hurdles to get over to get to that point. So and not the least of which you're going to say abortion's wrong because of God and she does this.
well,
Once they've crossed their
that's not
arms and
exactly
lean,
what I said though.
it is precisely what you said. In fact, to be more specific, you said abortion murder is wrong because all humans are made in the image of God. That's what you said.
Well, murder is wrong because we're all made in the image of God. But she would
Right.
agree that murder is wrong.
Not because we're made in the image of God.
Okay,
She'll agree murder is wrong because you go to prison for it.
okay. I was speaking in generalities, but the point is, like, a lot of people have never been really confronted with why do you believe what you believe, and are you consistent with it? Um, Having that discussion about abort, like, well, why can't I kill this, this baby? Well, because it's a baby, it's a human being, and you agree that murder is wrong. Well, it's not murder, it's a fetus.
Right.
Well, it's, and there's, I don't want to reproduce the whole logical chain that gets you from there to Jesus Christ, but the chain is there, and trying to change the subject to say, hey, as a non sequitur to talk about Jesus Christ, they're going to cross their arms there too. But explaining to them the issue that's under debate, how, and a lot of people, like if you watch these Charlie Kirk or Abolitionist Rising, Man on the Street interviews, you know who I'm talking about, that
Mhm.
group, Abolitionist Rising.
Yeah.
I see their videos on Facebook. They kind of hang out at college campuses, and people attack them for being conservative Christians, but they'll kind of press people on, like, a lot of people will come up and claim to be Christians and
Mhm.
say, Jesus doesn't approve of you fighting abortion. Well, no, in that instance, I mean, that's a Sonny Austin type. I'm a devout Christian and I say abortion is good. Um, well, that person's not going to cross their arms and you say, well, it's wrong because they're made in the image of God. You have to
Right.
confront them with their
Right.
inconsistency. But it's, I think if we were in this situation, if you and I were like, met this hypothetical liberal pro-abortion who says they're Christian, I doubt that we would be that much disagreed on how to approach
No,
it,
if they're a Christian that says they are, I was more jumping to the
or
person that's not.
or anybody. I mean, I don't think that it's hard to kind of play this out in
I
the
get it. I get
abstract.
it. And
Um,
we're disagreeing on minor points because it's what a conversation is and it's what the show is. I get it. No, but I think I guess the point that I was making is going back to more with like Dre's analogy of the black KKK infiltrator. Um, he didn't infiltrate and walk in and go, "Y'all should like black people. We're humans. I'm funny. Check this out." Like he did it like slowly. Was my point, right? He didn't come in and kick in the door and go, "I'm here and I'm black and you're gonna like it." He like showed up and was like, "Hey guys, can I hang out and sit in the back and listen because I'm curious." You know what I mean? And then he kept showing up, and then over time they got to know him as a human, and then that relatability then kind of carried over, and then he was able to win hearts and minds by being a good, decent dude, not by being the smartest guy in the room. I guess is my point is there's some value I think in winning people over, not by winning an argument, but by
yeah.
being the example through our, Christ said it, right? They'll know you by your fruits.
Well, let me clarify my meaning here. I'm not saying we need to figure out how to like go out and win arguments. But if congregations like if a church full of a couple thousand people were if they were one, if the preacher just insisted upon the value of like, hey, you need to learn to integrate the gospel into your worldview. You need to like this is a
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need
I agree with all of that.
you need to figure you need to understand these things. And if people were equipped to do that, and then those people went out into the world and and use that knowledge with all of their liberal coworkers and family members, like one church that undertook to do that could change the world.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
if
I don't
every
disagree.
church did that, the world would change a lot faster.
I,
But
yeah. I think it's interesting because I've been trying to take that on personally, right? Because I have been guilty of, having the different social groups. And, I'm a different guy when I go to church because it's Sunday and you show up and you do Sunday things. And then I go home and I do Sunday afternoon things that are not Sunday things, right? Um, and I've been really making a conscious effort to do a better job at blending that. I think doing this show was a big start, right? Like, um, just getting online and talking about my religious beliefs was incredibly hard. It wasn't hard to do a recording with the three of us, but for those that don't know, I'm the one that does the editing. It was really hard for me to hit the upload button the first time. I had we had 6, 7, 8 episodes that we had already recorded, and I hadn't pushed send yet, and I was dragging my feet because it was uncomfortable. It was super uncomfortable,
yeah, I remember that time. I'm just like, what are we doing, man?
and I was like, it's
you just-
hard
you
things
just
and
collect-
stuff.
you just collecting
Technology.
these or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
This show is interesting, and I think that really church should be that too, because when the more you go, the more you realize that that's what you believe and that's who you should be. So, I think there's lots of changes that just happen, through, in my personal life and how I deal with others and my demeanor. I think, and I think this show for a couple years has kind of been a part of that. And it's interesting when you're not when you first meet somebody, but you spend a little bit of time and then someone finds out, a fun fact about you, like, no, wait, you do a podcast? I'm like, yeah, what is it? It's about spiritual. You do a spirituality podcast? right? So then and then they start, and then I can see the wheels turning where they start evaluating everything that I've said to them over the past month, right? And they start evaluating on, look at dress, what are your jokes like? How are you, right? And then sometimes it's like, well, shit, that dude's human. I'm human. Maybe I can hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
Um, I,
Well,
I think there's a level of trust that you have to build with people before you can be on a personal level, right? Like religious politics and what's the other thing you're not supposed to talk about it, money, right? So
I thought it was just religion and politics.
maybe it is just religion and politics. I'm thinking Trinity here. I don't know. That's what you guys have done to me. But you can broach those topics with people that trust you,
Right.
right? So of course you don't just
Uh-oh.
blast strangers at an abortion clinic, but there's always somebody that's either been involved in one or knows someone or been raped, and then if you show compassion in those conversations, and then you're trusted, and then I mean, what's the biggest reason? What's the biggest turnoff for Christians if you ask somebody who's not one?
They're judgmental.
Correct. So if you kind of live your life in a non-judgmental way and just like,
Well,
all right, well, I mean, I know where you're going, Brian. I know you're gonna say, well, but you're not supposed to judge. Judge, let's be judged.
well, okay, where am I going?
I don't know. I give up.
Well, I mean, if you could say it for me and save me the trouble, that would
N-
save us all a
Well,
monologue.
there's so it, there's a problem with being right, and so what? That's where the line is. No, that's where the judgmental thing comes in, I think, because
I agree with you guys that if the person you're talking to does not believe that you care about them, that you love them, and you're saying this for their best interests, then yeah, they're gonna tune you out. And I would, and I think that should be your priority, is to love every person you know and to convey that, like, you value God's image in them. But at the same time, there, this whole Christians are judgmental thing, and us reacting to against that. I think that Matt, have you frozen, or are you just fixated on what I'm
I'm
saying?
just listening.
Okay. I thought I lost you for a second. Sorry. Um, I think that unwillingness to offend has been so thoroughly weaponized by the left that I I think it is appropriate to just speak plain, blunt truth.
So I agree with you. So
But
yes,
you
hang on.
can.
So hang on. So
And a lot of
yes,
times it's not even for the purpose of winning the person you're talking to. It's all of the onlookers. And I never set
I
out to
think that's a
be,
cop out.
I,
So yes, being tolerant and not wanting to offend has been weaponized. That's one side of the extreme. The other side of the extreme is I'm right, so I can say this however I want to, and I don't care how it lands because I'm righteous. And that's a problem.
what would be an example of that?
Somebody says, um, you know, I had a child out of wedlock and I had an abortion, and and you go, do you know God? And they say no, and you go, well, you're going to burn in hell, and I hope that if you don't change your ways, you're going
Yeah,
to burn in hell.
I don't, I
No,
don't, I
that's
don't think that's a common thing that happens,
it.
though.
I think that
Absolutely
it is.
is.
It's
It
100%.
100%
It's why
is.
people hate Christians. That is why. Now
And
I'll give you just an example that's not even that, right? So when I was in recruit training in like second phase, I got I got busted using the phone. I've told the story before, right? And because of that, I was all the way down at Balboa, and when I came back, the chow hall was closed. So I had to get food from the chow hall after hours. And the little corporal of the guard told the staff sergeant in charge of the chow hall that I used the phone, I broke rules. And this guy, the staff sergeant's like, well, you're still a Marine or you're still a recruit, right? We take care of our own. We take care of people. I know, basically saying, I know you sinned, but it's okay. You still have to eat. And always remember that the people that you lead are going to do things that aren't that aren't savory, that aren't right, that aren't correct, but you can't turn your back on them. You have to love them no matter what. So if somebody did something that's offensive at one point in their life and you're being non-judgmental, it doesn't mean that you condone the act that they did or just tolerate bad acts. But it also doesn't mean that you don't hand them a blanket in your house when they're cold. It also means you don't maybe give that person a ride. It also means that you don't give them a helping hand when they need it. And I think that there's the line that you can be correct and you can correct someone, but you can always be compassionate.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, but I also think
But I
it's
think that's
like
the angle that we take, and that's how you win the hearts and minds.
uh,
Be strategic in this.
yeah, of course. I mean, I don't I don't I think Christians who I think if there are people going around who are just confronting sinners, so to speak, and just going straight to, "Hey, you're a sinner, you're going to hell." Obviously, I think their motives are not in the right place. I don't think that they are. If those are actual Christians, they're very immature Christians. I think that
Right. Can I ask you this then? Can I ask you this? Is that different than just completely disassociating yourself with someone because of a sin you know they committed?
who are we talking about? Who does
I'm talking
that?
about Christian. So it's easy to not bring the fire and brimstone as the extreme that we're saying right now. It's easy to not do that by simply not talking to them, by not being in that circle, by not allowing yourself to be in the presence of someone who's a liberal. In the it basically you turn your back on kind of like the way they do us,
Yeah,
right? So
I don't think that's a widespread problem today, though.
you don't think there's bubbles and people don't go outside their bubble?
I mean,
They don't say
I
fucking
think
liberal.
people,
I'm not talking to liberal.
I think people
I'm a
tend
God-fearing Christian. I don't
to,
speak to liberals.
I think if we're talking about the Sonny Hostin types who are devout, whatever, but it's a costume, it's just their tribe. Yeah, they're gonna congregate in their cliques and their little enclaves of like-minded people who affirm them in what they want to believe. Um, I don't think those I doubt those people listen to our show. Um,
No,
and they're not.
Dre's not pointing at one of us, and he's not pointing at even Christians per se. He's just trying to make a social commentary, right? And
Okay.
and this is the takeaway that I think
Because I
Dre
feel
was.
attacked.
No,
I
this
think
isn't
that
about
Oh
you.
no,
I'm
This
just
isn't at
I'm
you.
just kidding. I'm just
But
kidding.
like using the example of the chow sergeant or staff sergeant, right? Like that dude could have gone so many ways with Dre's situation. He could have been like, you know, shut up, recruit, you're an idiot. Get on your face, go home, die, like whatever. And then Dre would have been like, oh my God, right? And he would have known he screwed up.
And for the listeners who aren't Marines,
That would have been a very normal and accepted response.
well, but in boot camp, like
you
missing
don't
a
get spoken
meal,
to like a human.
but missing a meal in boot camp is like it's not like in the real
It's
world.
cruel and unusual punishment.
Like it is like you live. There was never a moment in boot camp other than like the first 3 minutes after I ate a meal that I was not ravenously hungry.
Yeah,
So
true story.
so you need that context to
That's true.
understand
That's a
the
good point
importance of
too.
that story.
Yeah, fair. But, so he could have yelled and screamed at him. He could have made it a point to go tell his drill instructor what he did. Um, or he could have said, "Oh, it's okay, recruit. Like I'm not a drill instructor. I don't care. Come in here, whatever you did, I don't care. I'm going to give you all the food you want." He could have done any of those things, but for my money, what that staff sergeant did, that dude was a dope staff NCO. And clearly, 30 years later, it sticks out in Dre's mind as a big lesson he learned, not from a drill instructor, right? And it was about compassion, not forgiving or discounting the transgression, but compassion in light of the transgression. And then he took the opportunity to drop real leadership training. Might have been the only leadership advice Dre ever got while he was at boot camp, right? Because drill instructors aren't teaching you how to lead Marines.
That same incident because the driver had to go tell my senior drill instructor what I did.
Yeah.
And he's like, get in here. And I was like, oh, sorry. He's like, shut up, sit down. But what did you do?
Yeah.
It's like, I use the phone. What? Why? Who did we say? First of all, who did you call? I said, I called my dad. He said, did it help? Yeah, I think it did. He said, well, do you think that you don't use a phone because that's a rule for no reason? He's like, if I thought that at the end of this cycle, all of you would be the best Marines possible if you use the
Right.
phone every single day, I would put you on the phone every single day
Right.
because that's the outcome that I want. But that's not the way it's going to go down. So what I need you to do tomorrow is to go be the first squad leader and be the best possible recruit that we have so that we can have a kick-ass platoon. Do you understand? Now get the fuck out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Yeah. And
You're dismissed.
And the genius in both of those scenarios were both of those Marines were more interested in landing a lesson than they were in putting a W on the scoreboard
Punishment
or
I mean, believe me,
rubbing your face in
he
it.
remembered.
And also,
It's a-
also for the listeners who aren't Marines to understand, you probably know this, but you don't really know. You don't really understand. In boot camp, any just the smallest kindness shown to you by anybody in authority, um, it's gold. You're so used to being yelled at
It's
and run around
battered
and
wife
just
syndrome.
that like when an authority figure like I remember like I was getting we were doing bayonet training one day and it was like 1,000 degrees out. It was in San Diego. We were out on concrete with the sun just hammering us. And this concrete was like an anvil reflecting it back to us. We were doing bayonet training and they by the numbers had us rest our rifle on our hip to take out our canteen, drink the water. My rifle slipped from my hip, and it happened in slow. I remember it in slow motion,
No.
and I had tried to reach down to grab it, and I was certain because it was happening so slowly that I with lightning speed I could reach down and grab it before it hit the ground and save myself. But I could hear it hit the ground, clackety clack clack, and it echoed. It was a booming echo of clack clack. And so, but I grabbed it and I went and I got and I was certain I was fast enough that nobody caught me. But before I even like finished that thought, drill instructor Sergeant Norton was just right in my ear, and he's just like, "If you saw that recruit, get in my pit." So I went to the pit and got IT'd, and this
he
was
died
like
3 times.
I died 3 times.
3 times.
This was
You
the
just died.
this
He
was
killed you.
This was in second phase, and it was only the second time I'd ever been IT'd. So it was kind of a big deal. It was kind of a point of pride that I had been like so perfect that like I never got in trouble except for the one time before that. But after I got IT'd for a few minutes, that drill instructor he kind of like he kind of walked up to me and he took me aside and he's like, "Hey, recruit, you know why I did that?" Yeah, yes, sir. Like,
You're an asshole. Like that's
Because you're a sadist and you have nothing better
no,
to
actually,
do.
this guy loved me. This guy was like, he was absolute like later on, like he was actually like kind of like protecting me from the other drill instructors. Graduation day, he had like the nicest things to say about me, to my dad, which was pretty cool. Um, but like he comes and he's like, "Hey, recruit, you know why I did that?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He's like, tell me why I did that." "This recruit dropped his rifle, sir." "You know what happens if you drop your rifle in combat?" "Yes, sir." "What happens if you drop your rifle in combat?" "You get killed, sir." He's like, "That's right, recruit. I don't want you to get killed. All right, go back to training." And it was just like, it's like he felt bad for ITing me, but it like, I don't know, it just kind of like made me just like not want to drop my rifle again because
you got to be trained while you're there.
Right.
It's just not
Yeah.
it's not just a big old academy for pain.
But
Well,
it was,
and the whole purpose of the whole event is to make one combat ready. Like
Yeah,
that's ostensibly the purpose of Marine Corps boot camp. My drill instructors did not love me. They also didn't hate me. My senior drill instructor looked at me when they were handing out MOSs and goes, "Who are you? Have you been here the whole time?" And I was like, since day one, he was like, I don't remember ever speaking to you. And I'm like, it's because you haven't. Because I've been a ninja.
I'm Japanese.
I was not on anybody's radar. They didn't know my name. Yeah.
Well, that was like the first interaction I had with the drill instructor that was he was punishing me, but it was like affectionate.
Yeah.
Like everything else just felt like you're a piece of crap and we want to haze you because we're
Right.
cruel and it's fun. But this time it was like, hey, I'm sorry. It was almost like he was saying, hey, that hurt me more than it hurt you.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so
So
That's
yeah.
how we have
Anyway.
to deal with Sonny Hostin.
Yeah.
You just
yeah,
have to tell her,
I
like,
was
hey, I had to slap the shit out of you, but you understand why?
It came from a place of love, and
It came from a place of
I hope
love,
to
and
never
I
have to do
want
it
you.
again.
I don't want you to burn in hell because you're all. No, I just,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I love you. I don't want you to.
So what's
Yeah,
the takeaways? We need to be better Christians. We need to blow up abortion clinics, and the Pope is Catholic. I think that's what we learned. today.
Yeah,
I think the functional title of the show is going to be "On Popes and Fatwas." Is going to
yeah,
be the title.
you know. But yeah, you have to live the lifestyle and have people notice it
Yeah.
and have people trust you. So when you speak, it holds some weight.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lesson for everything that you do.
The message has to land. I think
Well-
that's what's playing in my head, like that phrasing. Like if the message doesn't land, there was no value in it.
Well, and if you're not integrating the truth of the gospel into your life, you're just wearing a costume.
Mhm.
You're just
Then-
like it doesn't. You're a Sonny Hostin Christian who
But might I
hates-
say you don't actually have faith?
Yeah.
or you have
There is
faith,
that
but
argument.
you have faith, but it's in your tribe. It's in your
Well, no,
institution.
I think what Dre's are you saved, right? Are you even
Yeah,
saved? Are you
right.
saved? Do you even salvation, bro? Right. Like, because then
Right.
the real question is, and I don't say that to be hateful or nasty, is do you know the Holy Spirit? Right. Like, because that's the question that really comes in is if a person is acting a certain way and they suggest they say they're saved, are they? Because, that's a tough pill to swallow, right? Like, what's the meme? My dog doesn't bite, but he can hurt you in other ways. Right.
What?
There's a meme and it starts off with the guy, she says, does your
Right.
dog bite? And he says, no, my dog doesn't bite, but he can hurt you in other ways. And then the
Right.
last panel is always a really deep biting statement. Like, the veteran one was Kuwait wasn't a wasn't a combat deployment.
I'm
Or-
just trying to track. Sorry.
The scathing statement is, if the Holy Spirit was really in you, would you act that way?
Right. Okay.
I'm
Gotcha.
just, it's the motorcycle one is your bike leans further on its kickstand than it does when you ride it.
Oof.
So yeah. So what do
All
you
right,
so what do you
all right.
what do the listeners think? Did we go too far? Not far enough? Are you going to follow my fatwa? All right, guys.
All
All
right.
right, well-
We solved whatever that was.
Whatever it was. We
Whatever.
solved something.
What are we even talking about? What are we saying? And with that, I mean, I guess after having a fatwa, you should definitely stay curious about such things. Stay enlightened. We will catch you next week. Thank you, and God bless.